Hey everyone, Alex from Cranford Tech here, and today I want to walk you through DocuPotion, which is a PDF solution built specifically for Bubble. We're going to cover a lot in this overview, just to give you a preview of the kind of things that we're going to cover. First of all, I'm going to talk a bit about why I built DocuPotion and why it's different to other PDF plugins or solutions available. We'll then go through getting up and running, so signing up for an account and installing the plugin. We're then going to go through a number of different PDF examples. So we're going to start off by generating a really simple one-page PDF, but then move on to really complex, detailed, multi-page PDF reports where we have dynamic data, where we have page breaks, headers, footers, and all of that good stuff. We do have customers using DocuPotion that frequently generate reports over 100 pages long, so you can really make your PDF generation a valuable feature in whatever app you're building. But maybe first, just a quick note on why I built DocuPotion. I've been building Bubble plugins since 2022, and one of my more popular plugins is a plugin called PDF Creator, but I kept getting customer requests for features that it just wasn't designed to do. I really built it to generate PDFs of simple elements that were visible on the screen to the user, but I had quite a few customer requests where people wanted to create PDFs that included elements not visible to the user, or add very specific page breaks, or generate the PDF in a back-end workflow. And I realized it wasn't specifically my plugin that couldn't do these things. Pretty much all of the Bubble PDF plugins had similar limitations. So in 2024, I decided to solve the Bubble PDF problem once and for all, and that's why I started DocuPotion. So let's move on to signing up and installing the plugin. You're going to want to go to pdfpotion.com and click on the register or sign in button. Put in your details and then click on create account. You're going to be brought to the DocuPotion dashboard. Now, you can see that you're automatically given 50 free PDFs per month. If you use up this amount, you can go to my account and upgrade to a paid plan, but we do provide 50 PDFs for free, just so you can test it out, get it up and running in your own application. Now, you'll see here that we have to get started by generating an access token in the My Account tab. So I'm going to go over to the My Account tab, and I'm going to click on Generate Access Token. Okay, we can see now that the next steps are installing the DocuPotion plugin from the Bubble Marketplace, and then copying and pasting this access token into the access token and access token dev fields. So I'm going to go back to this Bubble app that I've set up. I literally have nothing in it except for this one create PDF button, but I'm going to go to the plugins tab. I'm going to go to add plugins, and I'm going to search for DocuPotion. And you can see here, we can install it for free. And then if we go down to the very bottom of this page, we will have 4 fields. We'll have access token dev, and then we also have the API token fields. I'm going to come back to them later because it is quite important, but just for getting up and running, we're not going to go through that now. Okay, back to my DocuPotion dashboard. I'm going to highlight my access token, copy it, and then paste it in my access token and my access token dev fields. You'll see here, because we've installed the DocuPotion plugin, we have 3 actions: create PDF, download PDF, and warm up. We're really going to focus on this create PDF action for now because it's key to actually generate our PDFs. So I'm going to go back to my design tab, and on this create PDF button here, if I go to add workflow and I click on plus and I go down to plugins, we now have the option to create PDF. Now, as I mentioned, DocuPotion comes with a bunch of features. There's so many things you can do, and we're going to go through most of these today. But to keep things simple at the start, we're going to create a very basic PDF. In fact, let's just create our simple one-page PDF. And the way DocuPotion works is, a lot of Bubble plugins, you might have a group on the page. So let's say, for example, we had this group here, and let's just call it group PDF. And let's just give it a background color. The way a lot of Bubble PDF plugins work is you have this group and you need to add an ID attribute to it. And I'm just conscious you're going to have to enable ID attributes here. But you would simply go down here, you would say my PDF. Then you would add this to a workflow, and the PDF plugin would simply generate a PDF of whatever's on screen, which is in this case the group PDF, and you'd be done. Now, that comes with certain limitations because you really have limited control over what you can show the user, and the way PDFPotion works is a bit different. So I'm just going to get rid of this group. The way PDFPotion works is you actually create a separate page in your Bubble application. So I'm just going to call this page PDF. I'm going to clone it from the index page just to save myself having to get set up there with the kind of shell group I put in. But this is our PDF page, and we're basically going to design our PDF here, and then we're going to tell PDFPotion in a minute to generate a PDF of that page. So what I'm going to do for this example is create a really basic checklist that someone might print off and then tick off as they walk around an area, maybe carrying out tasks or doing inspections. And I think it's just a nice basic example to get started with. So I'm going to, first of all, pick the dimensions of my PDF. And what I mean by that is we're going to be generating a PDF of a certain size in a minute. You'll see here back on our Create PDF action, we have the option to choose from A4, A5, A6, some bigger sizes, letter legal tabloid ledger, or we can choose a custom size. I'm going to stick with A4 for now, and there are specific dimensions you're going to want to use in your PDF page depending on how you choose your format. So if I go over to my PDFPotion dashboard and I click on the docs, there's an article here, recommended dimensions for creating PDFs. And as you can see, it's recommended we design our PDFs using the same dimensions as the page format. So in our case, we are using an A4 sized PDF. So the recommended width is 794 pixels and the recommended height for a single page is 1123. So I'm going to go back to my PDF page, and then on my group main container, I'm going to set a fixed width of 794. And I'm also going to set a fixed height of 1123. Now, of course, sometimes you're going to have dynamic content and you're not going to be sure how long the PDF is going to be, and you won't want to use a fixed height, which is totally valid. And we're going to go and discuss that when we're creating our multi-page PDFs. But just for the sake of creating a single page PDF, I'm going to set it as a fixed height now. And in order to distinguish the PDF, which is effectively going to be this group, from the rest of the page, I'm just going to put a light grey background color here. And then make my PDF itself, just that white color, so it really pops out. So let's grab a text element. Let's just make this heading 5. We're going to call this checklist. We'll put it in the center of the page. And then let's just add in a group. And let's say this is going to be group item. And let's put in a text element. And we're going to say for this particular item in our checklist, let's just say it's going to be called bathroom inspected. Maybe we're a property valuer or someone who's looking at a property and deciding or going through all the kind of items that they need to check off. And let's also put in an icon which might indicate the kind of check that they're putting next to the checklist. So let's just find an appropriate kind of empty circle. And that'll do. I don't think it's actually meant to be a kind of check item, but it'll do for our purposes. Let's make it a bit bigger. And then let's also change this to be a row. Let's put this in the center, or vertically align it in the center. And let's spread it out. And finally, let's put a bit of a gap in between the various elements. So we'll say 12 pixels. And I think that is exactly what we want. Maybe let's put a max width on this of, say, 600 or 640 maybe. And let's undo that, but let's put it in the center. Okay, so that's one item. Let's copy that. And for our second item, let's just say Wi-Fi functioning. And let's do a few more. Okay, that's fine. I'm just going to put in some placeholder data here. Okay, so we have our checklist here with 5 items I went with in the end. And let's say someone wants to print this off from your application, and then they'll tick them off as they inspect the property. What we're going to do to create a PDF of this page is we're going to go back to our index page. On this Create PDF button, we're going to start adjusting our Create PDF action. So the very first field that we need to fill out is this website home URL field. And if you look at the documentation here, it tells us exactly what to do. We just need to add the dynamic expression website home URL. So I'm going to click on Insert Dynamic Data, and we're going to scroll down, 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 and we put in website home URL, and that's it. The page name is exactly as it would suggest. We simply type in the name of the page that we're creating a PDF of. So in my case, I called my page name PDF. So that's why I'm going to add in the page name field. Identifier and callback URL are really important. We're going to come on to them in a minute when we actually get to the stage of linking the PDF to an entry in our database. But for now, I'm going to leave them blank. I'm going to change my file name to checklist. And that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to preview my app. I'm going to click on Create PDF. And you'll just notice here, this loading bar is taking a second. And the reason for that is the Create PDF action. It's a server-side plugin action. And as you may or may not be aware, Bubble server-side plugin actions, they just take a minute to warm up. And you can sometimes have that annoying pause at the start of the action. So what I like to do to get around that, and this is really kind of an advanced tip, is on the page where you may be running that Create PDF action, I like to add in a workflow that says page is loaded. And then what you can do is under plugins, I've added this warm up action to the DocuPotion plugin. And what this basically means is when you load the page, it's already establishing a connection with DocuPotion. So you shouldn't have that annoying pause for 6 seconds before anything kicks off when you're creating the PDF. Now, you would have noticed nothing actually happened there, or it seemed like nothing happened. But if I go back to my database, and if we go into File Manager, you'll see here we actually do have this file called checklist.pdf, and it was created at 12:33, which is about a minute ago. And if I open it up, you'll see that this is actually our checklist. So we've actually created our simple one-page PDF, but we didn't actually open it in our browser. We didn't download it, so the user didn't have access to it. And because DocuPotion is doing quite a bit behind the scenes, especially when it comes to more advanced PDFs that we're going to get onto, we just need to do a bit more work in getting it set up and allowing the user to access it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my data types section in my database. I'm going to create a new type, and I'm going to call this checklist. And then under the checklist data type, I'm going to add in a field called link, and it's going to be of type text. So what I want to do is I basically want to take this link here and add it to my link field. Now, in order to do this, we're actually going to need a backend workflow. So you will need to be on a paid Bubble plan to use backend workflows, which means you will need to be on a paid Bubble plan to use DocuPotion full stop. But what we can do is in our backend workflow section, we can add a new API workflow. I'm going to call this one Get PDF. We are going to expose this as a public API workflow because DocuPotion, once it's finished generating the PDF of our PDF page, it's going to send a message to Bubble via this backend workflow, which means that it needs to be made public in order for DocuPotion to communicate with it. This workflow can be run without authentication. I'm going to tick this now But for best practices, you actually should untick this. And I'm going to show you in a second how you can uncheck this so it does require authentication. But just for now, I am going to leave it checked. And then for ignore privacy rules from running the workflow, I'm also going to check that. You're going to want to add 2 parameters here. And it's really important that you spell these out exactly as I'm going to say now. And the first one you're going to want to add in is ID. It's going to be of type text. And then the second one is going to be link. And again, it's going to be of type text. We're then going to add an action to this backend workflow. And it's going to be make changes to a thing. And the thing we're going to change is do a search for checklist. And we want to change the very first checklist in our database. But we're only changing the first one where is unique ID is equal to ID. This probably isn't too clear at the moment what's going on. I think it might be clear if I go back to my create PDF action. Because if I go to that, and let's say before creating it, what I want to do is I actually want to create a new thing. And let's create a new checklist. So now whenever I click the create PDF button, we're creating a blank checklist entry, and then we're creating the PDF. But what we can do to link this checklist we're creating here to the backend workflow is use this identifier field. It's basically a unique ID to identify the PDF that we want to link the link to. So what I'm going to put in here is result of step 1, it's unique ID. And this means we're nearly there in terms of linking our PDF that we're creating to our checklist entry in our database. But we need to fill out this callback URL field. And what this is, it's actually just the URL that's associated with this backend workflow. So what you can do to get the specific URL for this backend workflow is if you go to the settings tab of your bubble editor, and if you go to API, you can copy this workflow API root URL, go back to your create PDF action, and just paste it in there. And then at the very end, what you're going to want to do is add in a / and then the name of the backend workflow that you created, which in my case was get PDF. So we're good to go. Hopefully now, whenever we create a PDF, it's going to be linked to that entry in our database that we're creating in step 1. But just before we do, I want to give one bonus tip on this callback URL. You'll see here I'm in development mode and I have version test in the callback URL. Just to keep things easy, what I would recommend doing is clicking on the callback URL and deleting everything just before API, and then inserting dynamic data and inserting website home URL. The reason I suggest this is this means Bubble will kind of take over the decision of whether you're in live mode or whether you're in test mode when you are creating the PDFs, and it just means you don't have to worry about, conditionals for version test versus version live. It just keeps things simple. But let's see if we manage to get that working. Let's refresh our application and let's create our PDF. Okay, so let's go back. Okay, so let's go back to our database, and I'm going to go to File Manager first, and I'm hoping now we see a second entry here, and sure enough we do. It's going to look exactly the same as the previous one, but I'm also hoping that in our app data we have checklist, and we can see here that we don't actually have a link. So something's gone wrong there, and I think I know what it was, because if we go to our backend workflows, we did all the hard work. We said, okay, DocuPotion is going to send a message to this URL. It's going to pass through the unique ID and the link, but we never actually updated the link field here. So we're searching for the first checklist where the unique ID is equal to the ID the DocuPotion is sending. And what we need to do is click on link is equal to link. So hopefully this time now we will actually see in our database the link linked to the checklist entry. Okay, I can see it's run. And if we go back to our data, you can see now we do actually have a checklist entry in our database. And if I copy this, and if I paste this in here, we get our checklist. Okay, so this is definitely progress. We can now actually add the URL to our checklist entry in our database. But now let's say we want the user to be able to download the PDF or open it in a new tab. What we can do is we can make use of this really useful custom event that Bubble has. And if we just click on new, and if we go to custom, I'm going to create a custom event called PDF created. I'm going to add a new parameter. It's going to be of type checklist, and I'm simply going to call it my checklist. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say when this event is triggered, what we're going to do is we're going to download the PDF. And the link is going to be equal to the checklist's link. And the file name, you can do whatever you want here. You can rename it. I'm simply actually just going to leave it as checklist. So we actually want to trigger this event when the PDF has been successfully created. And Bubble has a really nice way of letting us do this. If we add another action after our create PDF, we can go to here under custom events, trigger a custom event when data has changed. And what we can do is we can watch a specific thing. The thing we're going to watch is the checklist that we create in step 1. And we can say when the link field has changed, in our case, it's going to go from a blank value to actually having a URL. We're then going to trigger the PDF created event. So let's try that again. Create our PDF. It's going to take a second. It can take a few seconds for DocuPotion to create the PDFs just because there's quite a bit going on in the background. But you can see here, we downloaded our checklist and it's open in our browser. You could also, if you preferred, instead of downloading the PDF, you could not do that, but instead you could open an external website and simply open the link associated with the checklist. So if we created our PDF again, and again, just takes a couple of seconds for everything to go through. This time, you can see my pop-up's actually been blocked, but if I always allow it and actually went to that link, and let's just create it one more time to show you everything in action, we should hopefully see another window just opening with our PDF in a second, and sure enough, that's what we're getting. So that's how you create a really simple PDF with static data. We now want to move on to a bit more complex use cases. And first of all, I think it would make sense to include some dynamic data, because I guess it's quite rare that you're going to have a PDF with exactly the same stuff on it every single time. So let's start building a more complex example. Let's actually just take a quick detour before we get on to our more complex PDFs, because it's a good idea to talk about our backend workflow here, our get PDF backend workflow. You may remember when I was initially building this out, I'd checked this workflow can be run without authentication option, but best practice is really to leave this unchecked, because if a bad actor potentially knew the endpoint URL associated with the backend workflow, they could theoretically call it if we didn't activate authentication. So what you can do is you can uncheck this item here, which means it will require authentication to run. And then if you go to the settings tab of your Bubble editor and go to API, you can go to the sections here, API tokens. And I've already generated an API token, but just to show you how to generate one from scratch, you can simply click on generate a new API token. I'm going to call this API token. I'm going to then copy the private key. And if I go to the plugins tab of my Bubble editor and scroll down to the bottom of the DocuPotion one, I can enter that API token in here and in here. It's going to be the same token for both. And then if I go and refresh my demo app and click on the create PDF button again, we should be able to create a PDF as normal. Let's just see. Yep, that's our checklist PDF there. But if I had not provided the API token and I tried to generate a PDF, nothing would happen. We wouldn't get one back because it wouldn't have been authenticated. So that's just a way to add an extra layer of security to your bubble application. I'm going to just add those API tokens back in. I will of course change these after this video because they are quite sensitive pieces of information. I would certainly be careful on where you put them, and I wouldn't be giving them to any third party unless you did trust them. But like I said, it does add an extra layer of security to your backend workflow when you use it with DocuPotion. Okay, back to building our more complex PDF. And what I was thinking we could do is we could take our very basic checklist here and instead turn into a more customized checklist where the user can actually generate the checklist themselves. They can add individual items. So instead of just using these static ones, different users can add different items to the checklist. And then we might also create a cover page so that each checklist PDF looks different depending on which user creates it or based on what options they choose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my database and I'm going to create a new type, and I'm going to call it item. And I'm simply going to give one field to the item for now. I'm going to call it name, which will be of type text. And then in checklist, I'm going to add a new field called items, which is going to be of type item, and it's going to be a list. So the idea is that every checklist has a list of items, and these are going to be our items. But like I said, we're going to create them dynamically rather than relying on static values. Let's go back to our index page, and we have our create PDF button there, but let's add another button in. Let's just put a bit of space in between them. And what we're going to do is we are going to call this button add item to checklist. And then we're going to rename this button create PDF of checklist. I'm then going to grab an input element. So we'll grab that there. Let's make this a bit wider. Let's go with 360. And what I'm going to do is every time this add item to checklist button is clicked, the user is going to have typed in a value here. We're then going to click this button. And what this will do is it's going to somewhere temporarily save the items. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on index. I'm going to set a custom state of items, which will be of state type item. And again, it's going to be a list. And then when I click on add item to checklist, we're going to go to here and we're going to set the state of an element. The element is going to be the index page. The custom state is going to be items. And we're going to add in an item. But of course, the first we must actually create that item. So rather than making this step one, I'm going to insert an action before. I'm going to create a new thing. The thing is going to be item. Its name is going to be whatever is in the input elements box. And we're going to set the custom state of items to be equal to the existing state, which is going to be effectively 0. So we'll go to index, items, and then we're going to go down and we're going to say plus item, the result of step 1. So every time we click on the create or add item to checklist, we're going to be adding a new value to the custom state, which is here. And if we add another item, it'll be added to the list so that the original one and the new one are both present. And we're then going to display all of these in a repeating group just below the input box. So I'm going to grab the repeating group. We're going to set the type of contents to be equal to item. And it's simply going to be equal to indexes, items, and that's it. We won't have a fixed number of rows. We'll make the min height of each row to be equal to 80. We will have one column, and we'll set a max width of 540 for now. We'll take off the min height. And then I like usually adding a kind of group inside the repeating group just as a kind of container. So we'll call that group org container. We'll let that take up all of the width and height of the repeating group cell while also adding in some paddings. So we'll just unthink that fit height to content. And then finally, we'll add in a text element here, and that's going to be equal to current cells or parent groups thing, which we haven't set yet. So let's set the type of content on the group to also be equal to item. And the data source is going to be the current cells item. Then if we click on that text, we can simply add in parent groups item name. And there was one other small thing we forgot to do, which is when we're adding an item to the checklist, we need to reset the relevant inputs just so we don't have duplicates in there. So let's test this out. Okay, you can see nothing is showing up at the moment, but let's say we want to type in Wi-Fi connection working, add item to checklist, and it's showing up here. Then we can say in bathroom inspection, add item to checklist, and so on and so forth. So we're going to end up with a list of items, and then we're going to create a PDF of a checklist that includes these items. So what we can do to ensure we have all of these items in our PDF is if we go back to our PDF page, and instead of using this static group of values, we can simply find a repeating group. We can set the type of content to be equal to item, and then we somehow have to connect item to the checklist itself. So what I'm going to do is on this page, I'm going to set the type of content to be equal to checklist. I'm just going to change the page title while I'm here as well, because that's actually what will show up here. You'll see PDF Potion Demo 2025 was the original title. So I'm just going to change this to checklist. But now that we've set the type of content to be checklist, we can set the data source for our items to be equal to the current page's checklist items. We will unset the fixed number of rows. We'll set the min height to be equal to 60. We're going to use the same dimensions that we're using here, which I think was a max width of 640. I think that works pretty well. Untick the min height. And again, we're going to get rid of the separators for now. And we'll get rid of the borders. We don't have that, but let's add a group. Again, call this group RG container. Type of content here is going to be item, and we're going to reference the current cells item. And again, just like last time, I'm going to make this take up the full height and width of each cell. Put in some padding just to give it a bit of space to breathe. And then finally, let's add in a text element, which is going to be equal to parent groups items name. Let's take our icon that we had here and add it to our group as well. Let's change the layout to be equal to a row and spread them out. And then finally, let's align that vertically and this vertically. And we might actually need to make our repeating group a bit higher. So we'll say, what if we do fit to content? Yeah, let's take that, and that gives it a bit more room. And then we want to align it in the middle of the page, which I can never seem to get right first time. There we go. Okay, so now let's get rid of the previous groups that we had. And let's go back to our index page. And we're going to say create PDF of checklist. When we are creating our checklist in step 1, what we're going to do is we're going to go to items. We're going to set the list. And the list is going to be equal to our custom state. So index items. And then this is really the key point. When we're creating our PDF, we want to send this checklist data to the page name. So you might know that when you're going to a page in a Bubble app that has a type of content set on it. So let's say we were actually navigating to the PDF page, you have the option to send data. And we actually want to do this with PDF Potion as well. And we don't have this data to send field available on our create PDF action, but we can actually achieve the same thing by simply appending the unique ID of our checklist to the page name. So what we're going to do is at the end of page name, we're going to put in insert dynamic data, result of step 1, its unique ID. And that's going to send the data associated with the checklist we created in step 1, including all the items. It's going to send it to our PDF page, which will then get populated with the relevant items. Let's try it out. Okay, let's add in 4 items. So we're just going to keep it really simple. Let's say bathroom, inspection, kitchen, inspection, living room, inspection, and finally we'll go with bedroom, inspection. Then if we click on our create PDF of, and maybe just let me add that. So yeah, 4 items now. And if we click on our create PDF of checklist, we're going to create a PDF as usual. And if we give it a second, hopefully what we'll see is we get our PDF generated, but this time we have our 4 dynamic values in there. And just a way of kind of testing as to whether your PDF is going to have the dynamic values you want, what you can do is you can take the URL associated with the page that you're generating a PDF of. So in our case, we would just say the PDF page, and you can think it's going to be blank by default, of course, because we haven't sent any data. But just a way of testing out yourself, what you can do is you can go to the item you're creating, which in our case is the checklist. If you grab its unique ID and then append it to the end of the PDF page like that, you'll see we're getting our dynamic values populated. And this is what DocuPotion is going to generate a page of. Because remember, we've appended PDF and also the unique ID of the checklist in the page name field. So this is essentially what you're telling DocuPotion to generate a PDF of. Okay, we're making good progress with this. What I want to do now is add in a cover page so that, we're not getting straight into the checklist. Instead, maybe we have a nice kind of beginning cover page that maybe represents a company, or it's just kind of more professional looking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the PDF page in my Bubble application. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it on the page just so I have the same dimensions. And I'm going to make it first, but I will just change its name before I do that to group cover page. Make it the very first thing, and then I'm going to delete checklist, and I'm also going to delete my repeating group. And I'm going to take the padding off of this, because what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to add an image as the background. So I'm just going to go away to Canva for a second and create an image that is, precisely 794 by 1123 pixels. And I'll come back once I've created that. Okay, I've just created an image in Canva. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the background style here to image. And I'm going to upload it. And you can see now we have this image in the background. And maybe we want to put a title on the report. So I'm just going to grab a text element and say property inspection checklist. And I'm just going to put this in the middle of the page. I'm going to make it a lot bigger just so it pops out. And we'll change the font color as well. I think that worked reasonably well. Maybe I could go with a bit of a darker background so it's more obvious, but I'm reasonably happy with that for now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my homepage. And add in a couple of items quickly. And then create our PDF of the checklist, and this time it will have a cover page, hopefully. Okay, so this is how it's looking. Property inspection checklist. Yeah, pretty happy with that. Now, we do seem to have an issue here where we have this kind of gray area in between the cover and the checklist. So what I would do to kind of avoid that being an issue is I would, and I can see what's happening here. Yeah, you might remember on the page itself, we've put in a row gap of 40 pixels. So we get rid of that. Next time we shouldn't have that issue. You could also just remove the grey background color so it won't be an issue anyway, but let's just do a quick test. Yeah, that looks a lot better this time. Okay, so we have our cover page, but now let's pretend that we want to put the name of the person who is carrying out the checklist or carrying out the inspection. Let's say we want their name on it here. So let's go to our database and let's create 2 users. And before we do that, let's add a name to our user data type. And it's going to be of type text. And let's say there's 2 users. The first one is going to be Max Verstappen. And his email is going to be max@gmail.com. And the second one is going to be Carlos Sainz. And we'll say carlos@gmail.com. And then what we want to do is, well, there's a number of ways we could do this, but the way I'm suggesting we do it is let's get rid of the property inspection checklist here and instead put in carried out by, and let's put in, first of all, the current user's name, and let's make it a lot smaller. So we'll go down to heading 5 should be fine, and let's change it there. And then let's log in as max@gmail.com. And I'm on the PDF page. Let's go back to the home page. And let's create PDF of the checklist. And you can see it's opened up and there's no name here. And the reason is DocuPotion doesn't really know who the current user is unless we tell it specifically. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make use of the magic link field that's present in the create PDF action. So you'll see here under create PDF of checklist and look at create PDF, we have this field here called the magic login link. And if we're using data that's protected by privacy rules, which we're not really dealing with now, but it's the same principle, you can basically add a magic link here to run as a specific user, which means that any data that, that user can see but maybe other users can't, it will show up on the PDF then. And it's pretty simple to activate this field. All you need to do is simply go to insert action before. And if you find this action here, send magic login link. And what we're going to do is the email is going to be equal to the current user's email. The link expiration, you can set this really to whatever you want because we're going to be using it pretty much instantaneously. Navigate on login, just going to set that to index. Navigate on failure, again, I'll leave it as index. But the really, really crucial thing to look out for here is that you just create the link. You don't send the email. We don't want to accidentally send the magic login link to the user when we're just trying to create a PDF on their behalf. But now that we have this step in here, what we can do under step 3, which is our create PDF action, is we can click on insert dynamic data and we can say the result of step 2 and we're getting the magic login link there. So let's try and create our PDF again. Remember, we're logged in as Max Verstappen or max@gmail.com. Add an item to the checklist, and then we're going to create a PDF of the checklist. Now, there is one downside to creating PDFs using the magic link. It just takes a bit longer because basically behind the scenes, DocuPotion has to log in as that user, but it's not too much more, and you do get this nice effect where now we can see the property inspection checklist carried out by Max Verstappen. So that is how you would display data using the magic link that is specific to the user. There's actually another way we could do this as well. What we could do is, instead of using the magic login link, we could get rid of that. We could get rid of the step 2 there. And instead, if we went back to our checklist and we went to data types, we could say a new field called inspector, i.e. the person who carried out the inspection and used the checklist. And we set the field type to be user. Or in fact, what we could do is we could set it as text. And then when the checklist is being created, the inspector, the name essentially, could be equal to the current user's name. So this time when Max Verstappen creates a checklist, he's going to add in all the items, but he's also going to kind of hard code in this text value, which is his name as the inspector. And you can then reference that here on the PDF page. You can say, carried out by current pages checklists inspector. Let's give that a go. Add an item. Create a PDF. Give it a second to do its thing in the background. And yeah, you can see you're getting the name there for Max Verstappen. But if we were to log in as Carlos Sainz, and again we went back to the home page, added in our item, created our PDF of the checklist. This time we should get the exact same report, but just have Carlos as the name of the inspector rather than Max. And you can see there, sure enough, Carlos Sainz is the name. So I actually like this approach for this particular use case, just because we're not dealing at the moment with data is protected by privacy rules, and we can just put in the user's name there. Let's take a look at our checklist just to see where we are. Okay, so we have covered adding dynamic data. We're kind of in the process of creating a multi-page report, but I do want to provide a bit more detail on that. So what I think we might do is, let's go back to our PDF page and just create another page. I'm first of all going to actually reduce the size of this checklist page, because you'll see here it's taking up, a full page, but it's not necessarily always a full page in height. So what I'm actually going to do is just set the min height to 0 and then fit height to content. So it's going to be as long as it's needed, but no longer than that. Okay. I'm then going to copy my main container. I'm going to paste it again, and I'm going to call this group extra notes. So I'm just going to put a bit of text here that says additional comments, or maybe is there something better we can put it as? No, let's leave it like that. And let's change it up a bit so that it's over here. Let's get rid of our repeating group here. And let's say we have some additional text here that maybe the user is going to input later, but let's just grab another text element and drop it down here. And I'm actually just going to grab some dummy text for now. Okay, I got that dummy text, and I'm just going to paste it in here. Okay, so you can see now we have a decent kind of a couple of paragraphs. And let's create a PDF of this. And what I might do, just to kind of speed things up, I'm conscious I'm adding items to a checklist every time, which is a bit painful. So just for the purposes of this demo, what I might do is just kind of like have a pre-populated thing. So add item to checklist. What I'll do is I'll say, instead of kind of creating a new one every time, what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to do a search for items. And how many items do we have in our database at the moment? Yeah, we've quite a few actually. So it's going to add in all 14 of these, which is kind of a nice number. So let's do that instead. It's just a bit easier. Okay, so refreshing the page, adding our 14 items to our checklist. And now when I create a PDF of that checklist, we should get our cover page. We should get a repeating group with our 14 different items. And then we should also get that extra additional comments page. So cover page, checklist, and then we have our third page here with the additional comments. I'm noticing there seems to be one blank item there. Let me just check that out. Yeah. Oh, I think that's because we're still creating a new one every time, aren't we? Let's get rid of that. And just for the purposes of this as well, what I actually want to do is maybe just get rid of a few more of these, just so it's clear what I'm trying to do. And let's try again. Refresh our page. Just add our multiple items to the checklist straight away. Again, just saving time. And then create a PDF of that checklist. Okay, let's see how this looks. 3 pages, checklist. We have less items. And then we have our additional comments page, which is starting halfway down the checklist page. That's not what we want, because this checklist is going to be an unknown length. There could be, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 items. There could be 29. There could be 49. There could be however many. We don't know, which means that we're not always going to know where the additional comments page starts. But this is where PDFPotion has some extra features that make it really easy to create nicely laid out PDFs. And what we're going to do is we're going to put a page break on this additional comments page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my PDF page. I'm going to click on the group extra notes, and I'm going to go down here and assign an ID attribute to it. And I'm going to assign the ID attribute page dash break dash 1. I'm going to copy it. I'm then going to go back to the index page and my create PDF action. And you'll see if you scroll down here underneath privacy rules, underneath footers and headers, which we'll come on to in a bit, we then have these page break options. And PDFPotion actually allows you to add 3 different types of page breaks. I'm going to start off by just dealing with the simple element page break. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to paste in that page break 1. And now when I generate a PDF of my checklist, which I will do now, we should see the additional notes page being broken out onto a third page. So let's see, 1, 2, 3. We have our checklist, and yeah, you can see this time the additional comments page is being broken out onto the third page. We are getting this gray area here, which again is because of the color I set the page at the very beginning. We don't actually need that anymore. It was just more to understand ourselves the difference between the page width and the actual PDF width. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to set that to none. And hopefully that means when we create a PDF again, we're going to get a nicely laid out PDF with no kind of conflicting colors and a nice page break where we want it. Okay, so page 1, our checklist, nice color, and then onto the additional comments page. So that's how you ensure that certain elements can start on a new page. I do recommend kind of laying out your PDF in terms of a different group for every page. It just makes things a bit neater. But I want to go back to my items, and what I might do is I'm just going to add in another 8 myself here in the background. I just add them directly. Okay, so we now have 16 items in our database, and if I create our PDF of the checklist again, just after refreshing the page and loading in the 16 items this time, I just want to show you something around the page breaks. You'll see this time our checklist, it's kind of been split across 2 pages, and I don't like the way there's a bit of a gap and then suddenly it starts here. I do like that our additional comments page is still starting on a new page, but this just doesn't look the neatest to me. So what we can do is we can add in a top and bottom margin to make sure we kind of have a bit of space, at least if you're adding in, or there's a kind of an extra item that's overflowing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my index page, and under the create PDF action, we have this option here, top bottom margin. And I'm going to set this to, let's put in 50 pixels at the top and bottom of the page. Add in our items, create our PDF of the checklist, and then when it's opened up this time, what we should see is that we have this issue, and I'll come back to that in a second. Let's just focus on our checklist for a second. This is a bit better. You can see here it's been broken onto the next page, and at least it's not kind of hugging the top of the page. But now we have the problem that DocuPotion is adding that top and bottom margin to every page, and we set the first cover page to be equal to 1123 pixels, which is causing this overlap, which obviously isn't great. But again, we do have some functionality with DocuPotion we can use to avoid this. What we can do is, if we go back to our design tab in the PDF page, and if we click on a text element which is within the group, and I always recommend probably using a text element for this, it's just the easiest. What you can do is you can assign it an ID attribute called remove dash margin, and this is a special command that basically tells DocuPotion, look, I know you're adding in a margin on every page of the PDF, but ignore that for this specific page. So it's a nice way of not adding in a margin to pages like this one, where you really do want it to take up the full height and width of the page. So just to show you how that looks, add in our items to our checklist, create our PDF of the checklist, and this time when we open it up, we should see that that cover page is as we want it, where the image is taking up the full width and the full height. We have our checklist with a bit more room at the top, and then we have this kind of nice feature where every item on the second page isn't necessarily hugging the top of the page. Let's take a quick look at our own checklist here. So we've covered page breaks. Well, we've covered the kind of simple page breaks, but there is actually another type that I want to go through quickly relating specifically to repeating groups. And it's not going to be massively relevant for the example that we're building here, because we really only want, we're pretty happy with the layout of our items here where one follows the other. But let's say you had more detail in each of your repeating group cells, and you actually wanted each cell of the repeating group to start on the new page. What you could do is you could go to your repeating group, which is here in my case, give it an ID attribute. So I'm just going to call this RG break 1. Copy that ID attribute, and then back in our index page where we're creating a PDF, under create PDF, you could add that into this new page per cell. So this is effectively going to tell DocuPotion that, look, I know there's a repeating group. I want you to start every cell of that repeating group on a new page. So I'm going to click create PDF in a second, but I also just want to give a quick UI tip at this stage. You may have noticed it takes a few seconds for DocuPotion to generate a PDF. So what you can do that can be nice is add in a kind of loading screen experience. So what I like to do is go down here and search for a floating group, and let that floating group take up the full width and height of the page. Call it loading screen. I typically like giving it a kind of gradient and keeping it really simple, just using kind of two different transparencies and pretty simple colors. Don't really need that. And then let's say intermediate color, not really necessary. So we have this kind of loading screen, and what you can do is you can add a text in the middle that just says loading, put it in here, put it in here, maybe make it a bit bigger or a bit more obvious. Might actually make it white just to pop out a bit more. And you can also grab an icon if you want. And where's our kind of loading spinner here, I wonder? Yeah, let's just use that. Let's make it rotate. Make it a bit bigger. Put it in the center. And then what we can say is just before we actually create the PDF, we'll show this. So we'll hide it by default under layout. It's not going to be visible on page load, but when we're creating our PDF, even before we create the checklist, we can insert an action. We can go to elements, or element actions, I should say. Show an element. We're going to show the loading screen, and then in the custom event, what we can say is once the PDF is created, just before we open the external website, we can hide an element and we can hide the loading screen. Okay, so we covered a bit there, but just the two things to look out for. Number one, look out for the loading screen. And then number two, look out for the cells of the repeating group starting on a new page each. So create PDF checklist. You can see here we have our loading screen, which means we can't click on anything else. Then once our checklist is opened up, you'll see straight away we have 19 pages here now, rather than the 4 we had. And the reason is we have our checklist, but then each cell of the repeating group is starting on a new page. Okay, so not really relevant for this specific kind of PDF use case, but just a useful thing to kind of let you know. I'm going to remove that for now. So I'll click on create PDF. I'm not going to include the page break one, or RG page break one, I should say. Maybe two other things to mention when you're creating PDFs of repeating groups that are quite important. First of all, when you're adding the repeating group data, it's really important that you check this show all items immediately, because all the items are loading for us fine, but there's not that many of them. It's not a particularly intensive search. But if you have a lot of data, if you have a long PDF, what can happen if you don't check this is that DocuPotion can sometimes generate the PDF before the data has had a chance to load. So I would just always recommend ticking this show all items immediately box. And then what I would also recommend doing is if you have a kind of repeating group with a lot of data, I would copy its ID attribute. I would go back to the create PDF action, and I would say that it is a good idea sometimes to add the repeating group ID attribute to this repeating groups field. Again, what this does is it tells DocuPotion specifically, wait until this repeating group has finished loading and then create the PDF. Most of the time you're going to be fine and you probably don't even need this, but it's just like an extra layer of security to ensure that your repeating group data has loaded before DocuPotion does its thing. So let's go back to our checklist and look at the last couple of items that we want to go through in our demo. And the next key is adding headers and footers to your PDF. I'm going to go back to my create PDF action, and DocuPotion comes with a number of fields where you can add header and footer content. We actually have some pretty comprehensive docs on it that you can see here. It kind of goes through the various ways you can add special commands or add text or add images, but I'm going to go through it now as well in this video. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some text to the left footer content, and I'm just going to type in static text Cranford. You could of course use a dynamic expression if you're referencing a particular company or person or some other piece of dynamic data, but let's just see how that looks. Let's refresh our application, add our items to the checklist, and then create checklist. And you can see that there's not going to be anything on the first page because it's covered up by the cover image. But if we go to the second page, we do have some text here. It's quite small, and you'll see it's on the bottom of every page. So I'd like to do two things. First of all, I'd like to make this a bit bigger. I'd then like to actually add a page number to each of the pages of our PDF as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the footer font size from 8 to 14. I'm going to add a bit more on the left and right margin. I'm going to change it to 24 pixels. And then in the right footer content, in order to add a page number, you see here if you read this section of the documentation in the action itself, that you can add a page counter to either the left or right hand side of the footer by typing page counter into the input. So if I type in page counter, what I should see next time I create a PDF is a page number in the bottom right of each corner. So let's do that now. And once our PDF, we'll see first of all our text is a bit bigger, and we sure enough have page 2, page 3, page 4. So that's how you add a page counter. One quick thing to note is the footer is showing up nicely because we put a margin at the bottom of each page. If I didn't have a margin, the white color of this page would actually cover up the footer, just to kind of demonstrate that. If I go back to my create PDF action and I set the top bottom margin to 0, we're not actually going to see footer on every page with some pages. I'm going to refresh that. Add items to our to create our checklist again. And you'll see this time that on the first page, we're not getting the footer showing up. And the reason we're not seeing it on the first page is essentially the white background of the first page is covering it up. Whereas it is going to show up at the bottom of this page because there isn't actually, any page container covering this. You might remember we put in a page break, and then it's going to show up on the bottom page as well. Now, it may not be the best example just because it is showing up in some and not in others. One way to maybe demonstrate this a bit better is just put a background color on the individual pages. So let's do that. Change the background color here to red temporarily, and we'll change this one to blue temporarily. We'll create our PDF one more time. And this round, you'll see, okay, this kind of highlights that this is the first page. We're then putting in a page break where there's no real background color, which is why it's showing here. And the reason the footer is showing up on the bottom page is because this page isn't extending fully down. If I had set a fixed height of 1123 on my additional comments page, then this footer would not be showing up. So I usually recommend just adding adding a top bottom margin just so this issue doesn't occur, but I just wanted to demonstrate what it looks like and why it may or may not appear in certain circumstances. So let's do that. I think that's going to get rid of the footer or the margin as well at the bottom. And let's move on to uploading a logo, because this is obviously something that a lot of people may wish to do. I'm going to go back to my index page, and I'm going to go back to my create PDF action. And I'm going to leave the footers as is because the header logic is exactly the same, and we can use some text elements there if we want. It's going to increase the side margin so it matches what's up there. But what I'd actually like to do is upload an image and then reference that image in the header. So maybe the company logo is at the top of every page. So I'm just going to upload a Cranford Tech logo here pretty quickly. Okay, so that's the logo. You do have to also manually set the width and height of the image. So I know that these dimensions, 120 by 40, is going to work pretty well for my logo, which is why I'm happy to leave it. But if you had, say, a square logo where the width and the height were identical, you might put in 100 by 100 or 50 by 50. It's just really important to keep the aspect ratio aligned with that of your actual image, or it'll look squashed. But you can see here from this instruction, if you want to reference this image in a header or footer, then we just have to type the special command my image into one of these fields. So that's what I'm going to do now. And let's create our PDF of our checklist again. And you'll see this time on page 2 and beyond, we're getting our logo, but it's getting cut off. So we haven't given enough space at the top of the page. And the solution to that is really go back to our top bottom margin, and let's increase that to 80 pixels. Now you may be thinking, why do we need 80? Why wouldn't 50 work? Because the height of the image is only 40, but you must also take into account the margin that's on the bottom of the footer. So by default, there's also a bit of margin put on the bottom just so the logo or the text isn't hugging the bottom of the page. That's why we need to go a bit above what the kind of height of the logo actually is. So creating our PDF again, and this time hopefully the logo will come through neatly. Down, and you can see this time there's plenty of room for the Cranford Tech logo. We have our footer, and it's repeated on every page. That's how you can add a logo, a page counter, regular text to headers and footers in your PDF. So the last thing I want to go through is running as a specific user and privacy rule compatibility. Now, we actually already covered running as a specific user back when we were looking at using the magic link when we were adding dynamic data, but I want to just talk about how that relates to privacy rules. So let's go back to our Bubble application, and I'm just in the privacy tab here. At the moment, my checklist and my item, they're both publicly visible, which probably isn't great practice. So let's say for item that we want to define a new rule. I'm just going to say item privacy rule, and we're going to say when this item's creator is the current user, they're able to view it, find it in searches, view attached files, but everybody else, they can't do any of those things. So if we look at the items in our database, you'll see none of them were actually created by a specific user. So if I refresh my application, and this time I say add item to checklist, you'll see nothing's actually showing up because I'm logged in as a user and they're searching for all the items, but they're not being allowed access to ones where they are not the creator. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add another couple of items, and I just want to check and make sure who I'm logged in as at the moment. So what I might do is just add a text and say logged in as, and then put in the current user's name. So we'll need to change that workflow again. Just go back to what we had before. Instead of setting the state with every single item, we're going to create an item. So we'll go to create a new thing, create an item. Name is going to be equal to input A's value. And then we're going to set the state not by searching for items. Instead, we're just going to say it's equal to the state itself, which is indexes items. And then we're going to plus an item, which is equal to result of step 1. Great. So if we're logged in as Carlos Sainz, and then let's create a couple of items. So we'll say item 1 CS and item 2 CS, add that. And if we create a PDF of the checklist now, I suspect we're not going to get any items at all showing up because, like I said, unless you have been the person who created the items, you're not going to be able to access them. So let's see what we get. Yeah, and sure enough, you can see, looks like there's 2 blank items there, but we're not actually getting access to all the items we want. Let me just have a quick look in our database here. So it's finding the items, but it's not finding the names associated with them. It's getting the count, which makes sense. Let's just delete everything except for these 2. Okay, so now we're back to kind of 2 items in our database created by Carlos Sainz. Only he should have accessed them, and the way we can verify that is by going to workflow. And again, before we actually create the PDF, we're going to use our magic link again. So insert action before, send the magic login link. Email is going to be the current user's email. Just going to quickly go through this. One, index, and then really importantly, like I said earlier, just create the link. Don't send the email. We can then reference that link in our magic link field. So we'll say result of step 3. And if I refresh my app, and one more thing I should have made clear was, okay, on my PDF page, what was I doing before? I was simply getting the checklist from the current page. That's not what I'm going to do. I'm simply, just for this demonstration, I'm going to just do a search for all items. Refresh that. So now when I create a PDF of a checklist, then I should be able to see only those items that were created by the current user. So if I create the PDF of a checklist as Carlos Sainz, I'm hoping to see 2 of those items appear. And then when I log in as Max Verstappen in a second, none of those items should appear. Okay, scroll down. And yeah, you can see here in the checklist, we have item 1CS and item 2CS. But if I log in as Max Verstappen instead, and go back to the homepage, create the PDF this time around, I'm guessing I'm not going to see those 2 items because, like I said, they're protected by a privacy rule. They can only be seen by the users who have created them. Carlos Sainz did create them, therefore he's able to see them. Max Verstappen did not create them, therefore he's not going to be able to see the name associated with those items. And sure enough, you can see it's showing up as blank there. So that's just an example of how privacy rules can be enforced in the PDFs you create with PDF Potion.